with Facebook, you never quite know when it's actually live. Claus, welcome to the show. This is Claus Rosenberg Gotthard of Epic Partners. You go for really exciting names, Claus. Thank you for coming on. Um, help. I'm going to help you today if you are watching live with us or indeed on the replay with the whole question of the realities of the M&A process when you sell an FBA business. So that's what we're here to talk about. Claus, welcome to the show, first of all. Thanks for coming on live with us.
Thank you, Michael. And yeah, Claus Rosenberg Gotthard. I'm Danish originally, but these names don't really sound Danish. I guess I have some German Swiss roots in my name. Yeah,
Yeah.
and Epic Partners is, we are just hopefully doing epic work for these fantastic founders and sellers on e-commerce.
Excellent. Yeah, and I could see that you got a picture of the Tower Bridge behind you there. So there's the London connection was there. Just myself the other day running a mastermind with our guys. So if you are watching, listening, then please do pop any comments or questions you've got for Claus into the stream. I will be able to see the chat when I find the right button here. Yes, here it is. We probably won't weave it into the podcast, but we can do if it sort of works. So pop them in. We may even answer you live, but certainly we can pop back some comments and thoughts as well. So with that, Claus, our usual practice is to record the podcast as live. So are you ready to rock and roll with this podcast recording?
Absolutely. Let's do this.
Okay. Right. Let's get the camera back to me, and let's do. And here we go. Ladles and jelly spoons, boys and girls, welcome back to the 10K Collective podcast, the place to be for 6, 7, and 8-figure Amazon sellers, also for broader e-commerce sellers these days, but Amazon's still our focus, part of the amazing FBA family. Today we're talking to Claus Rosenberg Gotthard from Epic Partners. Claus is the founding partner and the CEO of Epic Partners, which is an M&A advisory firm specialized in e-commerce. And what we're going to talk about today is the realities and some of the kinks in the M&A process, i.e. when you sell your business, all is not necessarily what it might seem on paper, and we're going to help you guide you through those rapids. So first of all, Claus, warm welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Michael. And, really the origin for me to launch Epic Partners is that, first and foremost, I'm a founder myself. I've been an entrepreneur for well over 30 years. I have launched a number of businesses. I have experienced spectacular failures and award-winning, but I've also sold 3 of my own businesses. And when I saw what happened in the e-commerce space and this aggregation and there's roll-up starting to happen, it got me a little bit worried because in a normal M&A space, let's say in a normal business sense, the buyer and the seller would be knowing roughly, what's going on here and what's going to happen. But in the e-commerce space, you have extremely sophisticated buyers, most of them out of Stanford and other esteemed universities with financial degrees. And then you have regular founders, people that build a brand out of their garage or their spare bedroom, and then suddenly they are getting, approached for millions of dollars of businesses or euros or pounds. And, that knowledge gap doesn't provide for a fair and level playing field. So we are helping these founders, we are serving these founders level that playing field of knowledge, experience, and getting them a fair value and a fair business. Because like you just said in your introduction, it's not always as rosy and easy as it's portrayed by the buyer.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? But because in our own spaces, like I had a mastermind meeting on Wednesday. Weirdly enough, if you're watching the video, folks, you could see that Claus has a lovely picture of Tower Bridge behind him, like you're up in a pretty high building for the camera angle.
Or chopper.
We had a meeting the other day just around the corner from Tower Bridge in a hotel, and everyone was talking about how to do product launching. And of course, there's the Amazon terms of service, and then there's reality of how you need to try and basically the terms of service are don't manipulate the ranking, and of course launching is all about manipulating the ranking, not because you don't try and produce a good product or be honest, but you've got to get visibility. And I guess that the same thing happens in an aggregator, right? That okay, yes, they're not trying to be dishonest or bad or treat people badly, but they have a business to run, and they are going to try to run it in a way that means they maximize their income and their return on investment, etc., etc., etc. Which means that if you don't know what you're doing and you get fooled, well, they're going to just say it's caveat emptor, or in this case, caveat whatever the Latin word for seller is, vendor. And in other words, they expect you to protect yourself. They're not out there to protect you, and that kind of makes sense. So in other words, the best protection is savvy education, right? I think street level education helps, but if you've never sold a business before, you can't do that from your own experience, right? You need help from somebody else. So this is important stuff, I think. So let's get into this. I mean, the first thing, let's talk about the places where people make mistakes, the entrepreneurs, the sellers themselves. What are the big mistakes that they made when they're going into a selling situation? They've got a business to sell. They start a discussion with an aggregator or possibly a broker in order to find them another seller, another buyer, I should say. What's the first thing they get wrong?
I think the first thing that goes wrong is before those steps you just mentioned here,
Right.
because when you, first of all, there's a whole conundrum of, should I sell or shouldn't I sell? I mean, this is your baby. This is something that you have gone through. So one day it sounds like a good idea, and the next day it sounds like a really stupid idea to sell your business. So first thing is, get yourself and your partners, your spouse, your business people, get yourself all aligned that we are going to do this, because there's nothing worse than coming further down the line with a potential buyer, and then not the entire team of shareholders and founders and everything is on board with this and agreeing with this. So first of all, make sure that the stakeholders are aligned here, that we are going to do this. And then before you even approach potential acquirers, be that aggregators or through a broker, you need to have a look at your books and your bookkeeping, because very, very often, and there is nothing wrong in that, everyone does it, you will tend to load your P&L with private expenses or other expenditures to lower your corporate income tax. And that's just fair enough. But it's just, in a world where every 100,000 is all $500,000 in exit value, it can become quite expensive that you have loaded in an extra car and a salary for your wife's sister, etc., etc.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you did that out of purely an operational benefits. You have your own company. You can do whatever you want. You are the own boss, etc. And that's great. But in an exit scenario, buyer is always paying for the ability to make money. And if you are not there any longer, and some of these expenses are not there any longer, you should address this and show this, that, hey, here's 100K, it went for this, so it's not really an expense, so align your stakeholders and get your finances reviewed by either an accountant or with a broker and advisor that could say, hey, what are these lines in your P&L? Is that something we can turn into what we call an adjusted EBITDA, or in this space we call it SDE, seller's discretionary earning.
Add backs, I guess, as well, so that affects it. Yeah. So in other words, you're not going to be employing, whoever buys the business isn't going to be employing your wife and your sister and whoever else you can put in the books. They won't have that cost, therefore you can add it back in. Understood.
Exactly. And I want to say another thing is that in the first instance, when you make this approach, if you make the approach directly to an acquirer, we are salespeople, business owners are salespeople, so they would like to portray this as good as possible. So they might come out and say, well, my business does, $1 million in adjusted earnings, and the potential buyer would take that as sort of face value and will run with it, and will make you potentially an LOI, letter of interest or letter of intent, to acquire your business. And then when you open, look under the hood, and if that number is suddenly not 1 million, but it's 800 or 700 because, you were a little bit optimistic in your adjusted earnings, etc., that just kills a little bit of trust. Okay, then, you have to remember these people come in and they're buying your ability to make money. And if it was not that good, but it was something less, then they will definitely scrutinize more. So be realistic. It's okay to sell yourself. Great, and you should do that, but don't over portray your ability to make money, because that's really, it will be a little bit of kill of the trust.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And by the way, I think that's true. A lot of the mistakes that people would make in any selling situation, it's weird how, having spoken to lots of aggregators now, and it's been a fascinating learning curve for me, and hopefully I'm able to serve my clients better by, giving that guidance or passing on your guidance. But what strikes me is that actually it's all about selling, and it's all about selling something on the one hand and what the buyer experiences on the other hand. And if on an Amazon sales listing you claim your product will, cure psoriasis or cure acne or whatever claim you make for it, first of all, there's some legal issues that can come, and that can be true if you're selling a business. And secondly, if you claim A, but it's only sort of C grade, then you'll get very disappointed buyers and then leave you a rude review, and it sort of kills your business. Now, equally, I guess if you make exaggerated claims about your business as a whole, which is the thing you're packaging up and selling to somebody else, it's going to have the same effect on the trust, right? And the difference being an Amazon buyer can leave you rude reviews instantly, but they can't also kind of go and examine your business. Whereas I guess somebody who's buying your business is going to be, looking at it with a forensic level of detail, like a bit like opening their doors to a detective or something, right? So, what are the other things you see going wrong with the gap between sort of claims and reality then from the sellers making life difficult for themselves?
Um, One thing is that we're seeing is that when you go out there, you put your business out there for sale, um, and then you will receive this letter of interest or letter of intent (LOIs), and those are very much stipulating the general terms of a potential deal, and very often there's an exclusivity period in here. And what sellers has to be aware is that you are then not allowing yourself to speak to anyone else. So be very careful to sign LOIs that has these exclusivity terms in them. Exclusivity should come at a much later stage, maybe where they have already had a little bit of access to your business, so that you can maybe what we do for our clients is that we make a data room. We give people access signed under an NDA, etc. They can have a look at the business and the numbers and the financial setup, but we don't give exclusivity because it's our job to find the best deal for these founders. And so if they're doing it themselves, they should do the same thing. They should try to avoid exclusivity, because it ties you up to someone for 6 weeks where you cannot talk to someone else. And they might just, some aggregators and buyers are on a fishing expedition. They're just looking what is out there and, getting to know their margins and the earnings and this is a good business or not. And then 6 weeks later saying, no, thank you, for various reasons. But you as a seller just lost 6 weeks in finding the right investor.
So I guess what we're talking about there is the ways that the buyers can cause problems. There's certainly lots of ways, I guess, the aggregators or even, trade buyers could cause problems. But let's talk a bit more about the ways that we screw ourselves up as the sellers or the business owners to start with. What are the other things that we could do? So avoiding exclusivity, important, but overclaiming on your revenue, claiming too much to reduce your taxes, but of course it reduces your profit numbers as well. What are the other things that people can get wrong on that?
I mean, a clear one is using of fake reviews, black hat operations, and stuff that you have stuffed your ranking on Amazon with, which goes into many other conversations like you have had, I'm sure, many times. It's just not good practice. And if the buyer finds this, and they have software to look for this, and they have, it's part of the due diligence process, and they will actually write it in their offer that they do not work with fake reviews, et cetera, et cetera. So how frustrating it is not to have that review and ranking in the beginning. Please, don't go ahead and use some black hat operations where you're getting a ton of reviews.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And another thing is, it is a suspension risk. I mean, I've had clients who've got suspended over policy violations. That's normally the nastiest one, isn't it, as opposed to the numbers? And I would say review manipulation is right up there. And that's because, again, it affects the relationship of trust, right? A lot of these things seem to be resolving back to that Amazon buyers trust Amazon, and that's why they keep coming back there in a lot of numbers and why the conversion rates are so high. And Amazon wants to keep that relationship. So it makes sense that they would take that pretty seriously, and it therefore makes sense that the people buying businesses that work on that platform should take that seriously as well. And by the way, I would say, here's the interesting thing about preparing to sell. Is what I would say to anyone, even if you don't have any intention of selling in your entire lifetime. And I know some people who've giving their businesses to their grandchildren, or pass them on, rather, not giving them, pass them on, and they are the grandchildren of or great grandchildren of founders. I would say whoever owns it in future does not want suspension risk hanging over it. So even if you never sell your business, you still shouldn't be doing the same things, right? But I guess when somebody's going to investigate it, it becomes a more sharp, acute problem. But I think it was a chronic problem before. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it isn't there, as a risk, right?
No. On in terms of other things, and then now we comes into sort of the personal, the role play here of the buyer and the seller and the negotiations. And as most founders, I'm a founder myself, and as these founders that are selling their businesses, you're proud of what you've done. You put a lot of love and a lot of your in personality in this brand. So when it comes to these negotiations, founders tend to take it very, very personal, and that's the problem here, and that's why I'm not to just to flower my own cake here, but to have a third party in between is actually where it is also very, very important, because it gets very personal. And so when there is a pushback from the buyer in the process of negotiation, and there is things highlighted in the due diligence and brought up, and things that founders of course takes this personal, and that can sort of become a very hard no or a hard stop when it shouldn't be. If you think about it, okay, you were running a lot of your marketing expenses over your personal credit card, and we find out, so let's just address the ACOS. What is it really? People take that as a personal insult that you looked into their private credit cards, but let's look at it. It was not disclosed. I'm just giving a hypothetical example here, and it gets personal, and there the founders have to really, really consider that it is business. Okay. And for the buyers, just like you said, it is business. For them, it's about acquiring a business as cheap as possible with the highest potential of a greater return than average. And so for them, it is about buying a good business as cheap as you can. And for the buyer, it's also business. So this, having your personal ego in it, can sometimes be quite damaging.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that people hire lawyers to defend them in court, and occasionally, I guess somebody who's got legal qualifications might choose to defend themselves. But there's a lawyer that we had on the podcast a while ago, Robert Wright, who's an intellectual property attorney, nothing to do with the business of M&A, but he did say the phrase, "Only a fool has himself for a lawyer." So despite the fact that he's an intellectual property lawyer, when he developed some IP, he hired a lawyer, which is weird, isn't it? So there is something about the objectivity of somebody whose job it is to represent you that can be useful. I just want to sort of push back a bit here on the obvious question that arises is, do I really need to give a business broker, a percentage of my money, which is not quite the same topic we've been talking about, but it's kind of comes up, doesn't it? Because you're going to give them, 5, 10%, maybe even more of the deal. That feels like a massive chunk. Is it not easier for people to educate themselves about how to sell their business than to hire an expensive broker?
Well, I'm obviously biased here, but I have sold a number of my own businesses, and to be honest, there is so many things. There is the tax, there is law, there is the negotiation part that I talked about. There are so many things that you, as a founder, it's just impossible for you to yes, you could study for it and you could read up on it, but you are never going to be able to do it as good a job as a professional will do here. There's very few people that is selling their house directly, and that's for a reason. This is even bigger, as a bigger asset event of your life. It's the biggest asset event of your life, most probably selling your business. You need to surround yourself with the best people to give you the best advice. And you know what? Very, very often, these people make you the money back. I'm not going out and promising that I will get you those 5, 6, 7% that it costs to use a professional advisor more, but we do get that very, very, very often. We do see that we are paying ourselves back, because a direct negotiation with an acquirer, especially if it's the aggregator, they will only look at your trailing 12. So, they will only look at what have you done and how have your abilities been the last 12 months, which is a bit unfair if you are at a high growth trajectory. We should also take in potential future growth and earnings. So it's our role as an advisor here to say, okay, let's do some financial forecasting. Let's find out, what is a fair number to play, not just on the trailing 12, but actually also looking a little bit into the forecast. So there are so many moving parts in selling your business that, I just want to say, please don't try and do this alone. But if you do, and if you do not want to work with a partner, educate yourself, read up on blogs and, etc. There's tons of educational material out there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that in a sense, what we're doing here, it's like I say to my podcast guests, and I think it makes total sense that what we do on a podcast is tell people how to do stuff themselves, or perhaps how the process works. And then if they choose to work with an expert, they could choose to hire somebody understanding the process a bit more. I think either which way you should understand what you're doing, even if you're hiring somebody. But yeah, you have a good point. And I suppose we've had one person on the podcast who's producing an entire book about how to sell sorry, not your own podcast. It's how to sell your own FBA business to aggregators direct. But he did go through the process once of using a broker, and he has got a background in business to business sales. So that there may well be a horses for courses question, i.e. for some entrepreneurs, if they could get the time, if they have the expertise, if they're able to be objective about their own baby, which I suspect, as you said, is probably the hardest emotional discipline, then maybe they can be their own broker. But for most people, I suspect you're right, that is not probably going to happen very well. Just thought I ought to address that since you've brought that subject up. What are the other things that we mess up as the business owner then, if we're selling to an aggregator or some other buyer?
Again, during negotiations, the way that payment is being done will come up at some point, and an acquirer will of course try to pay as little right now and pay more later. And just remember, what is being paid later is out of your own money, because it's your business that they are using to pay you from. So be very careful on what is called the earnout. There is what is called cash at closing. So that is when the documents are signed, the business is handed over, whether it's in assets or in shares. And then there is very often an earnout period, which is sort of fair enough, because you can, the new owner will come in, and if it's a share deal, that means everything that has happened in the past is now on their shoulders. So they might actually want to have a stability amount that is blocked for potential legality and legal cases, unpaid VAT, taxes, etc., etc. But also there will be a payout for how well the business is performing when they are now owning it. So look out for as large a cash at closing and as little earnout and as little stability fund as possible. In all fairness, again, if the buyer wants to see 20%, because during their due diligence they found irregularities with tax filings and I don't know what, then you have to understand that it's maybe fair enough that they ask for this. It's not that you're not going to get these money. They just want to have this money blocked for potential things that comes up once they are now the owners of the business. And again, here it can become very personal. People takes it personal. Are you telling me that I didn't do my stuff right and now you want to block so much money? You can see it can only become, we haven't even signed yet, and it can always become already quite grubby here.
I can imagine also that the savvy negotiator knows when to feign anger or to just walk away and say this is ridiculous and walk out of the room. And there's lots of famous movies about negotiation, a lot of which is probably nonsense because the good negotiators is probably much more diplomatic, and that doesn't make for very good movies. But on the other hand, there probably is a moment where you should walk out the door and say, I don't believe you, don't trust me, I'm going to take the deal to person X, and you don't really mean it, but you're feigning emotion. I think that's probably one of those savvier things that again, if you're really sophisticated negotiator, you're probably good at. But as I can't remember, I've read various books that say things like, well, most people aren't as good at negotiation as they think they are. I think that's probably true. I'm one of those people who has the terrible delusion probably that I'm good at negotiation, but part of me has the grace to know that I'm not. And I think it's probably true for most people. By the way, we're talking about deal structure, aren't we, I guess? So tell me about the other things. So cash at closing versus earnout, stability fund, as you say, putting stuff aside in case you've not declared enough VAT and the tax man comes after the aggregator once they're the new business owner, and the earnout. What are the other mistakes that people make here? Are you saying that basically we should be very careful about earnouts? That's a big mistake that the sellers make, or what are the other mistakes people make around the deal structure?
The the thing with the earnout is it's not a mistake, it's just a risk. There's a risk applicant, because now you're no longer running the business. They are, the new owner is running the business. And of course they want to grow the business, but something could happen that they are not running it as good as you did, or they're not having the growth that was expected for you to get this earnout. So whatever is tied up in that earnout period, it comes with a risk. We very often see that everything is being paid out. The company has been grown 20-25%, in the first quarters or 2 quarters, and therefore the whole earnout is being paid out. I'm just saying that those money are being marked with a kind of a risk and asterisks around it.
Now, there's another thing that came up the other day that I think somebody from, one of the aggregators out there I was interviewing was saying that a lot of earnout structures are on profit. And of course, there is a conflict between the needs of a business acquirer who wants to grow a business quickly versus the wishes of an earnout if you have that structure. Because, of course, as you pointed out, and I hadn't really thought this one through, but it made sense that if you want to grow something, you first need to invest in it. That normally means you're trying to grow revenue. When people talk about growing a business, normally what they mean is growing the revenue, right, to start with the hope that the profit follows afterwards. And therefore, if you're putting a lot of resources, overheads at something, maybe you're more aggressive on PPC, that sort of thing, that actually the profit might be lower. So if you've got an earnout based on percentage of profits, that could actually be less than you used to have, or at least not grow. Whereas an earnout based on revenue is wiser. So what are your thoughts about that? What do we need to look out for there as the seller?
No, absolutely right. The buyer will come in, and very often we see brands wanting to sell, or founders wanting to sell, because they are maybe growing 50 or 100%, but if you only have 20-30% margin, you're never growing, you're never taking money off the table. So they are actually coming to the table to sell because they are tired of always never taking chips off the table, and just keep growing and growing, and maybe not having access to that excess growth capital. So here comes an acquirer, and they have all the money in the world, so to speak, and they can put in all that money to grow your company, which is, of course, what you would like to see, but it does make that dip in earnings 100%, because they would like to see, revenue growth 25-30%, in the first 2 quarters or something like that. It's part of a requirement from the people that lends them the money. These credit lines that aggregators are getting are not cheap. They're quite often in the mid-teens, early teens, mid-teens of interest rates. So if you are buying a business, you paid 5x, 6x for it. You have your own overhead as an aggregator. If you don't grow the business, you will sort of not make the money to pay for the coupons, once you need to start paying for that loan. So it's very, very important that you grow the business very, very fast. And that is plowing money into PPC and optimization, maybe opening a couple of new marketplaces. That's also cost a lot of money. That's sunken cost there. You will take some time before you see that back as earnings.
Yeah. So what would your advice to a seller be? Get a percentage of revenue rather than a percentage of profit?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
absolutely.
would you just walk away from the deal if they say a percentage of profit, or would there be some nuance to that?
There could be nuances to it. You could, of course, it depends on the time frame. If it's 2 quarters on earnings, I think you're going to get short sell yourself, because there's a very big risk. And it also depends on what is being used as what the base of growing from. Okay, so make sure that there's a clarity in the definitions of, this is the earnings base we are having now, and this is the earnings base, whether it's in monetary, numbers, or in percentages, that we are going to pay out on in 2 or 3 quarters from now on. It's just risky to go for the the earnings, But of course, as a buyer, earnings is important to them, so that's most probably what they're going to suggest you.
Of course, and there is, I suppose, you've got a long enough time frame. Like, I know sometimes earnouts can be for 2 years.
Yeah.
I guess if they invest very aggressively for the first 6 months and
it's good, it's great.
Drip, yeah, because you should see that come back. And I guess that the people who are dealing with the lenders or the investors in the aggregators, if it is an aggregator or whoever the buyer is, will also want to see an earnings increase quite quickly based on the model that they're marketing. I think, as I understand it, this is not, Uber or Tesla. People aren't expecting to take the world over with a radical model. It's supposed to make profits pretty much from day one, right? That's, I believe, one of the attractive features of the aggregated model. So I guess that there isn't going to be that much of a conflict, but I can certainly see if you've got earnings based on the wrong base, the starting point, and then it's profits and it's only for 6 months, that really there isn't going to be much increase in profits there. I can really see that as well. So that's a
Absolutely.
very good point. Now, another operational thing that you've mentioned to me before when we chatted about this show was the supply chain side. Obviously, a lot of us kind of just do what we do every month, every quarter, whatever, and we get on with it. And we don't think too much about, paperwork to do with that. We just make sure that the price is right and the goods are good. And goodness knows it's hard enough to negotiate a good price and good quality, right? But are there issues there that we need to be wary of cleaning up as the seller?
Um, One thing that we have seen is that if you're having a unique product, we are very often here talking about unique brands, brand owners themselves, which is manufactured at a factory somewhere. Could be Europe, could be Asia, could be anywhere, and ensuring that you have an sort of an exclusivity with that factory, that this they are only making this for you. Um, Protecting your IP. If you have invented something new, if it's just a design patent, I mean, a design patent is better than nothing. I mean, but if you can get a utility patent, if you have invented something new, go the full mile and get a utility patent on it. It is so useful and so valuable in an exit scenario, that you can show that your products, your design, your branding, all this is protected by IP law. Do it in China, do it in Europe, do it in the US if you can.
Yeah, and by the way, people kind of give up on China. As I understand it, I'm obviously not a lawyer, nor do I play one on the internet. But my understanding is that there are multiple provinces of China now, the important ones included, I think, around Shenzhen and other places like that, where a lot of manufacturing is done, that do actually have pretty strong intellectual property laws. They're relatively recent, I think, so it's not part of the culture in China to respect it. And you certainly need to talk to some very, very good quality lawyers to get it done. But I would say don't give up on IP within China, but in Chinese with a proper Chinese lawyer who is enforceable in Chinese courts. And then also, yes, as you say, US, Europe. You can always look at WIPO, so World Intellectual Property Organization. Again, I'm not a lawyer. This is a precursor to you going talking to a lawyer. Do not take my legal advice. I'm not qualified. But yeah, I think you're right. This is one of those things that actually, weirdly enough, is feels complex, but if you get an expert involved, it can be time consuming and expensive, but actually relatively straightforward. You either have a patent for something or you don't, right? It's not like numbers where you can argue to the nth degree. I mean, to some degree, if you have a utility patent for something or a design patent in the USA, it's registered somewhere, you've got it, right? It's fairly black and white, right? And I kind of think that's a great selling point that people miss. And
Absolutely.
again, if you want to give the business to your grandchildren, well, that product's going to be knocked off by the Chinese in about the next 3 years if you don't, do something protected. So again, it strikes me the process of preparing to sell is basically a way of fine tuning your business, whatever happens next, actually.
I have an example of someone in the fitness industry that being blatantly copied. I mean, even the pictures of himself are on dozens and dozens of Chinese sites, and the product, of course, has nothing in relation to the quality and the product. But they're just blatantly copying. But so with this patent, whether it's a design patent or utility patent, and have it registered with Amazon, it's almost with the click of a button that he removes these sellers. Okay, so he can show us one day that there's like 30 stores that are copying him and having even his own pictures on their site, and with the click of a button, next week it's even sometimes in days. It doesn't take that long for Amazon. They're pretty good at this stuff now. It's down to 5, and then you just hammer it out harder on those 5, and then they're gone. So do the work, protect yourself. It's gonna pay itself back multiple times in an exit scenario, or if your kid's gonna take it over or somebody. Protect yourself.
Absolutely. It's a bit like that. You've got the Tower Bridge behind you. It can be used, the Tower of London has been used as a kind of attack on political rivals for hundreds of years, the princes in the tower and so forth. But also, if you've got a valuable thing, protecting it is not wasted time or money. And I think it's a bit of a startup mentality when you have nothing worth protecting. Yeah, you should just get on with it. Don't stress about IP and intellectual property and protection from everything and everyone all the time. You can get too risk averse. But equally, I think when you've got something worth millions, and if you haven't, then what are you trying to sell? But assuming you have, then the protection piece is worth time, money, and effort, I think. And that's often neglected because, people have worked very, very hard to build something. and now you've got to flip it around and go, oh, how do I protect what I've built? So great advice. So let's wrap up this episode. If we've got time, I'd love to do a quick episode where we can specifically focus on what the buyers are trying to do to trip you up as the seller. But for the moment, tell us. Obviously, you've got, as you say, you're an intermediary, an advisory firm specialized in e-commerce. What is it that you offer people if they want to work with you or talk to you?
So like I just mentioned, this is a difficult process. It is full of loopholes and things that you need to take care of. So we as advisors, we are serving these founders in the best way, whether it's legally. We are not lawyers, but we will find legal consultants and legal counsel that can help you formulate contracts, etc. We will help you position your earnings. We have accountants and people that will help you look at your earnings before. We will make investment memorandums. We make a teaser presentation of your business. We go in and analyze the potential future earnings, and therefore we set a frame of price for this business that is not only based on your trailing 12, and then we will argue that to a potential buyer why we are maybe asking for a higher price. So we are doing all of that. We are working closely with the founders. I keep saying the phrase, we are serving them, because I have been a founder and I am a founder, and I know running your business and then at the same time selling your business it just doesn't really work, so doing everything that we can for them to have a stress-free deal as possible.
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, there's enough stress just in operating these things, isn't there? Really, that's true. So I believe you can offer a business valuation and a free consultation. If people want to take you up on that, what are they going to get, and how do they get
Oh
it?
yeah, I mean, please do that. First of all, I am more than happy to jump on any call with founders, and they can just write me directly. It's Claus, CLAUS, at Aepic with an AE Paertners.com. Maybe you will put it in your show notes. And I say this just because I am getting on that call with everyone. We are not too big, and founders are just important to us and to me. So I want to speak with everyone. And
Yeah,
please
that's
do
important.
that.
Yeah, that does matter, because I know some founders have said to me that they find they get a fairly sort of unpersonalized service, so we say, from some brokers. They've had that experience, and from more than one person have had that. So yeah, that's good to know. So Aepic Partners, by the way, is spelled AEPIC-PARTNERS.com. If you're looking for Epic, if you're spelling it the American way, then actually, well, the British way as well. We don't spell it that way. Hey, AEPIC. You're gonna spend. I hope you bought epicpartners.com with an E, Klaus, because if not, then let's go and buy that
No,
domain.
I didn't, and in Danish we have three letters that is not in any other languages: A, Ø, and O, which is the A and the E and the O with a dash through, and then an A with a ball on top. And the way you're spelling the A, which is like in aesthetics, is if you pronounce it, it sounds like epic. So that's why
Yeah.
we chose that name.
Yeah, got it. So it's a proud Dane. And by the way, that brings us to another simple question, which is, do you deal with people from USA only, or Europe only, or where do you deal with people in sense of where the buyers are based and where their businesses are focused?
So we are that proper M&A advisory firm. So we deal with global buyers. Be that we have 90 plus aggregators in our database, but we are speaking with hundreds of strategical. We have private equity houses, high net worth individuals, brand groups, etc. So the buyer universe is global, and so is the seller universe. Whether you're a founder in Delhi that has built an amazing brand and you're selling on Amazon.com or .in, wherever, we can still serve you as a founder. And so UK, US, Europe, Asia, we are dealing with founders from across the globe.
Great. Well, that answers that question. Well, assume you got a bit of time, we'll talk about how buyers, are out to get us, or not necessarily, but the things where buyers can cause problems for us as the humble and victims here, the business owners. But for the moment, I just want to say thank you very much for coming on the show and for sharing some great insights and some things we need to look out for.
Thank you very much, Michael. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Cool. So that's us done with one thing. Let me have a look at the time here. Are you okay for about another 20-25 minutes, or have you got to dash to another meeting?
I honestly had 1 hour set off, Michael.
That's fine.
But I would love to continue, and
Yeah,
we're, but could we do that? I don't know how your calendar looks
do
for
it
next
another
week.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah, let's do that another time. Exactly. So if you're listening live, we're going to get Klaus back on. We'll sort that out after we go off air. But we are going to talk about how the buyers are going to trip us up. I just thought we ought to sort of wrap one thing up in a bow to make it sort of nice, clean podcast episode. But yeah, let's talk about that. So in the meantime, apart from the person who I've removed from the comments who said, "Hi, I'm a VI, can offer you services," that's not the sort of question that is intelligent or relevant. So if you're going to put unintelligent questions in, folks, I'm just going to remove you from my group. I always do that, and I will continue to do that. My team will do that. But other than that, if you have an intelligent question about how to sell your business to anyone at all, or how to work with a broker for Klaus, then do pop it in, and we'll catch it on the flip side when it's not live as well. But in the meantime, Klaus, I better let you get to your next meeting. Definitely get back on to talk about how buyers can trip us up, and it's been very educational to chat to you. Lovely to talk to somebody on the European side of the pond. We have a lot of aggregators based in the US. We talk to brokers in the US, so good to get a more European perspective. And look forward to getting you back on soon. That'll be a great conversation.
fantastic, Michael. I will look forward to that, and good luck to everyone out there, and do your best.